Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. And welcome to this roundtable of the 2026 Virtual Elections Conference on the front lines, the perspectives of electoral management bodies. So my name is Marjorie Marona from the Federal University of the State of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and it's my pleasure to chair the session. What brings this panel together is a perspective we do not hear often enough in academic settings, that of the practitioners, the electoral management bodies themselves. Elections are frequently studied from the outside. Today, we hear from the inside. Our four presentations take us to four different contexts, very different contexts: Nepal, Malawi, the Netherlands, and Georgia. But they speak to shared frontline challenges: digitalization and its impact on participation, public trust and strategic communication, the human infrastructure of elections, from poll workers to institutions, and institutional development under pressure. My hope is that the comparative conversation across this case will be as valuable as each case of its own. Our format today: each panelist will present from 10 to 15 minutes in the order of the program. Our discussant, Sonali Campion from the University of East Anglia, will then offer up to 15 minutes of comments and will close with Q&A. A note to our panelists on timekeeping: I will intervene when necessary, but I will intervene in fairness to your fellow panelists and to our audience. So our first presentation takes us to South Asia. Yogesh Aryal of the Election Commission of Nepal will present digital transformation and voter registration and its impact on democratic participation in Nepal.
Thank you so much. Uh, First of all, I would like to thank Electoral Integrity Project for providing me this opportunity to present my case study in Nepal. So the case study is digital transformation of voter registration and its impact on democratic participation in Nepal. So I'm Yogesh Aryal. I'm IT Director in Election Commission Nepal, and this presentation will take about like 10 to 12 minutes, and I will be glad to give the answers of any question related to this presentation. Now, going forward, the state of voter registration in Nepal. The Constitution of Nepal mandates the Election Commission to conduct the fair, transparent, and credible elections. And for this, we have a legislation and the rules which are mandatory to use the technology to provide the better elections. So, based on that regulation, Election Commission of Nepal has established desktop-based biometric-based voter registration system early in 2010. But this system was IT based, but it was totally manual because it was a desktop based system. Later, to make it more automatic or more online preferable, pre-enrollment system in 2022 AD was developed that enabled citizens to submit their basic demographic information online, but they had to go to the designated election offices. So they have to select the date and location, and then they can give their biometric details at the designated district or provincial election centers. Even though Election Commission has used technology for better voter registration and better participation, there has been some issues like these are some challenges of participation. First, the physical presence of citizen was necessary at election offices for the manual identity verification. So for biometric data, the citizen has to go to those election centers, which was one of the challenges. Due to this challenge, the individuals with health related constraints, people with the disabilities, and those residing abroad in other country, they could not go to those election center for providing their details. This administrative strain, like resource burden, was there because we need a specialized equipment for the BBVRS system, and we need like IT operator for the human resource also. And during the peak registration period, like when there was a decision of election, there was a peak registration period, and at that time the process was very slow, and there was a long queue of people, and there was a lot of delay. That means the administrative barrier became the participation barrier in election in case of Nepal. But recently, after youth led engagement in September in Nepal in this year, Nepal has decided to have an election on March 5. So for that election, we election commission had decided to make a voter registration. So during this voter registration period, I led the IT department in election commission. We decided to intervene our IT system by integrating national ID system. So our main objective was to remove the participation barrier through the digital transformation. Though we had the semi-online system, semi-automatic system, but the participation was very low. So we intervene a new system. So this initiative of intervening a new system was involved extensive collaboration between the election commission and the NID department, National ID Department of Nepal. This integration of NID has used like they have a facilities like real-time identity verification, eliminate the need for the manual checks, and transform the regulation workflow into the fully digital and self-service model. If we go through the comparison between this system and previously system, the legacy system, that is a pre-enrollment system, we can see here in this figure in the left hand side, we can see that the NID based system here, the citizen has to enter the NID number, their first name, and their date of birth, and the CAPTCHA. If the number and name and DOB was valid, then the citizen has to provide the additional information like the other information like caste, language, and education, and they have to select the voting center. If their voting center location is same as their NID address, then their application was directly submitted. If otherwise, they have to upload the other document like marriage certificate or migration certificate. After the verification of those document, the application was accepted. So this was totally online based. Citizen could do this through their home or at any time, so they don't need to go to the election offices. But in previous system, we can see here that to provide the biometric data, they need to go to this respective election center. So that was one of the problem. So what challenges we received during the implementation? So we had like a lot of challenges, like managers challenges. The main challenge was we need to make alignment with the stakeholders like the political parties, even the election commission commissioners, and the others party like home ministers and others. So that was our main challenge, because NID department and election commission, political parties, they need to come together to accept this system. Similarly, we didn't have much dedicated support structure for our system. So we, our small team, dedicated our time and developed this system without any proper support. So technical challenges, yes, the election was declared on March 5. So the time duration was very short for us, and we had intervened a new system. So that was a very tight timeline. So we had to develop our system and deploy it within a very short period of time. So that was a huge technical challenge. We had a very high load. It's a very good thing that our youth has a very good expectation in this election. So there was a huge registration request to our system. So that made us very high load. Similarly, as I have already told that we have a very limited timeline. So there was a limited testing opportunity. So we couldn't make the proper testing. That also had that also made us difficulty in implementing our system. So these were the main technical challenges. Uh, uh, Not only technical challenges, there was like environmental challenges. These challenges includes like not only our system, but we had different issues like the bandwidth issues in our country. As you all know that Nepal is a very small landlocked country. We have a very limited resources. Because of that, we had a limitation in a bandwidth, limitation in other resources. Because of that also, we got challenges in API integration and other data inconsistency. Since the people in Nepal are also not that literate, they gave wrong input, like they gave the wrong NID number, which was misplaced and which mismatched with our system, and we have to reject their application. So there was a data inconsistency as well. So these were the challenges that we received during this system. And after implementing the system, we can see that there was a huge improvement in participation in terms of voter registration. Like here you can see the comparison. In the legacy system, in 56 days, we could see around 344,000 new registration. Whereas after integrating an ID, national ID, with our voter registration system, within a 9 days we could see like 492,000 new voter registration. So that was a huge improvement in participation, not in terms of number but also in terms of inclusive participation. We can see like people with the disabilities and the people living outside the abroad, they also came to register in our voter registration system. Similarly, as I have already told, that youth engagement was too much high. So number of youth registration was also high in our system. And operational efficiencies was also improved. So as we have implemented integrated with the NID system, so data was directly extracted from the NID department. So there was a reduction in error. People could fill the form, or they could go online and do the registration. So there was no queues as it was in early system. Similarly, the staff work was also decreased. Only the IT department was much more busy, but other departments was like free because they don't have much workload now after this integration. So these were the positive response of this system. Now, I'd like to talk about what Nepal has learned by integrating this NID system, by doing the digital transformation of the voter registration. So the first one is inclusive digital system can meaningfully expand the democratic engagement and guarantee the inclusive participation. As we can see that the number of voter registration was increased massively by this digital transformation compared to the legacy system. So that is one major lesson learned by our country. The second is we could have the inclusive participation, so participation from abroad, the youth participation, the participation from like disabled people and by the other community as well. So that was main lesson learned for Nepal. Similarly, this digital transformation enabled youth and first-time Gen Z voters to register in our system. Similarly, it improved the accessibility to the person with the, like health related issues or disabilities or any other issues. And similarly, the migrant workers and students who are studying abroad, they also get involved in voter registration and eventually in election as well. So this leads to this we can conclude that shifting of voter registration from institution centric like election commission centric to the user centric model that reduced our cost, time burden and the geographic constraint. So these are the lessons learned from our system. So Now, this is all about my presentation. Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yogesh, for opening our session and for showing how digital transformation reshapes the very first step of electoral participation, registration. I mean, we move now from registration to trust. Sangwani of the Malawi Electoral Commission will present From Speculation to Trust, communication strategies that strain confidence in Malawi's 2025 elections. Sangwani, over to you.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and the opportunity that I can present, sharing something to do with the Malawi Electoral Commission's 2025 general election. This presentation is trying to integrate the role of communication in building trust and the management of election. I had put a capture that people judge elections not only by how they are conducted, but also how they understand them. The keyword is understand them. And also putting forward the fact that today's elections are not necessarily managed, but they are fought in two arenas. One, the polling station, where people are going to choose who they vote for on the ballot paper, but also in the information space. And also I'm advancing a narrative that the greatest threat to electoral integrity is no longer only violence, but also the information disorder. So we are trying to share the Malawi experience. Since I don't have much time, but I wanted to share some overview on the Malawi's 2025 general election. Then I'll paint a picture on the information environment, the communication challenges that we faced, and also examples of the disinformation narratives, then the communication strategies employed by MEC, and the key interventions, and also what we saw as outcomes. Then, as expected, I'll speak one or two as recommendations for the future. If I would share what would be the good news about the Malawi elections of 2025, observers said they were peaceful, they were transparent, and there was professional administration, and also results reflected the voters' will, and there was improvement in elections management. This is what you get when you look into the observers' reports, because they are speaking to the totality of it. But if I take you back to give you the communication environment when we are starting with the process, and more especially when we are doing voter registration, communication became an integral part of the entire process. We had engaged several strategies for communication, and indeed, the elections do not only take place in polling stations, but also on Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok. And the one thing I should share is that information moved faster than maybe the official announcements that we were making. Just to share, because I didn't give much of the background, when we are going into the 2025 general election, Malawi Electoral Commission had necessarily wanted to upgrade its technology. We already had biometric voter registration, but we are just updating the technology. That is, maybe in the previous we are using a Galaxy S2, and in this time around, maybe you wanted to use an iPhone 17. Just that upgrade of the system, it wasn't easy because it was misunderstood by so many stakeholders. So there are so many narratives that were being championed. So from the beginning, the Commission first organized the campaign, which was intended to undermine the confidence of the elections. And the top of them all was the opposition to introduction of technology. I should share an experience here that we never just dreamt to introduce and upgrade the technology. It came from the review recommendations of the 2019 and 2020 elections that the technology we are using was obsolete and we should buy new ones. And also, coincidentally, at that time, we had appointment of a new chairperson, and there was so much opposition to it from factors which are not in any way related to qualify someone for the appointment of chairperson, but there was just that resistance. So there were some quarters that also calling for the boycott of voter registration, and they even politicized each and every administrative decision conducted by MEC. They would always, since most of them were from the opposition side, then they would always target the commission and politicize everything that is intended to benefit the ruling party then to win an election. Some of the false narratives around the technology were including that the smartmatic technology, that's the supplier of the technology that we are buying, had caused conflict in Mozambique. So this is a narrative that became so prevalent and so many believed it, including the media. Yet a simple fact check could have revealed that in Mozambique, they never used anything to do with Smartmatic, and they never used any technology in their voting and results counting and even transmission. But here it was a widely spread rumor that this company you are buying technology from caused conflict in the Mozambique elections. You might wish to know that Mozambique had just held an election, I think a year before us. And secondly, they pushed the narrative that electronic systems would manipulate votes. We never knew where they got the system that we are going to use electronic voting when we are so clear in our narratives that we are not using electronic voting anywhere. And then people also came in to say digital voter registration was unsafe, that data would be stolen, and that even other foreign elements might have an interfere in the voters' roll or even in the results themselves. You will notice that even the third last narratives we are coming forward, we never had them previously before. Yet we also used the electronic voter registration. No, I should say mention biometric voter registration. There was sustained attacks on our institutional legitimacy, especially to do with the appointment of the chairperson, and everything that would do, they would question it in a manner that would want to undermine the integrity of the commission. We also experienced an appendage to the challenges that was coming from the media. Many journalists acted professionally, but there are some media outlets unintentionally or intentionally amplified misinformation. One, some of them would broadcast the allegations live. So I'll give an example that they would interview somebody for a 1 hour live program, and the person will be claiming we are opposing the introduction of the new technology for voter registration. Why? Because they are buying the technology from Smartmatic, and the Smartmatic started war in Mozambique. You see, so this is a senior figure in a country who's speaking this live on a very credible radio station. So somebody from who is a listener or somebody from the village there hearing a very senior person speaking it on a credible radio station would not have the capacity to question and doubt that as being misinformation or disinformation. So this is where the media failed us, because they never did the simplest of the fact checking just to assess whatever their listeners or their guests are speaking on radio. So when you looked at the disinformation supply chain, the media houses became gullible or unintended legitimiers of this. Because people would say Smartmatic started war in Mozambique. Where did you get it? We heard it so speak on radio. We really wished if the media could have taken just a simple step to always verify and do a simple fact check of whatever their guests are speaking. So the other thing that we also saw was that media was giving equal prominence even to issues that have been verified and those that have been proved to be false allegations. They could juxtapose them and leave the listener to make the final choice, which was putting them to disadvantage. You will notice that people will always be weak to the left whenever there are allegations to do with elections. They would easily believe the allegations than the dispute or the refutal of the same. Media failed to independently verify information. and some legitimized the misinformations. Though not being academical, but I wanted to share one theory that we had employed. It's called the inauguration theory. So simply it would say people resist misinformation when it be exposed to facts before falsehoods. When facts arrive before falsehoods. So in application of this theory, what we intended to do as Malawi Electoral Commission now was to explain the technology before deployment. We educated voters early, demonstrated the systems publicly. We trained the journalists themselves because they were so critical in the supply chain, and we engaged the political parties. I should share a simple experience on engagement with political parties. Prior to purchase of the technology, we had engaged the political parties. But now, in the course, we discovered that there are some vocal and powerful points within the political party structures who may not be necessarily direct engagement with us. And secondly, the people that we're engaging, whether it's Secretary General or Director of Elections, may not have been relaying the information to their party structures and also other leaders within the party on what we are doing. So you find that the resistance would come from other elements unlike those that we have engaged. The other theory that was so used was the two-step theory, whereby we say people would trust information from their opinion leaders. So you would notice that if this theory is applied to spread misinformation, it works that WhatsApp was becoming a very handy tool in spread of fake news. So the spread of fake news and disinformation, and where possible, outpace and outrun it. WhatsApp communities where we added all politicians, journalists, civil society, development partners, and everyone else who mattered on a public or wanted to correct. We could also use the WhatsApp. So you see that maybe the information might not be from Facebook, but for us, we would outpace it. Apart from using Facebook, we could use email, we could use WhatsApp. So by the time people that rely on WhatsApp for source of information, they are getting information, they'll get the correction from us and the fake news later on. And the other thing that I wanted to share was about building information literacy. We trained more than 20 journalists, and we also trained the political party leaders again. And the other thing that we emphasized on was not to help the information sphere by public engagement of the commission. So what we did was to go and buy airtime on radio and TV, and what we did was to host 1 hour live program. So we would give an opportunity to the entire nation now to ask questions directly, either to the commission chairperson or commissioners, depending on who was hosting that program. So this one worked effectively because it provided an opportunity to the listeners to ask on anything they had a doubt on. So in the end, what we saw was that communication contributed to better informed voters, it reduced speculation, it increased stakeholder confidence and contributed to holding of peaceful elections, and enhanced transparency and the broader acceptance of the results. The lessons for an EMB, communication is no longer a support function, it's a election management function. We should invest in speed, transparency, media relations, digital engagement, information literacy, fact-checking, and the stakeholder dialogue. I think I can conclude there since you gave me 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So our third presentation shifts the focus to the people who actually run polling stations. So Niels of the Electoral Council of the Netherlands will present voluntary poll workers in the Dutch electoral process, bottlenecks and solutions.
Well, thank you for your introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to present here today some research I have done at the Dutch Electoral Council, the Kiesraad. I work there as a researcher, and I'd like to tell you something about, as you said, the people who work at the polling station and who, well, make the elections possible. And well, in the last few years, we've seen in the Netherlands that there become some bottlenecks, and that was the reason why we did research on them. So we looked into the academic research, but also we did a questionnaire with poll workers last year during the national election, and I'd like to present some of those results. We also did a questionnaire with the municipalities who recruit them, and I also have some results of those research. And next to that, it is important to emphasize that the questionnaire with the municipalities had an over 85% rate of municipalities that answered the questionnaire, but for the poll workers, only 5% of the poll workers answered them, and we also do not know if it is representative. So I will say it when it is a representative number and when it is not. And as I said, the reason that we did this research is that there was a lot of difficulties with finding enough poll workers. And before I get further into that, I think it's important to tell you more about the Dutch electoral process. To give you an idea who is responsible for the recruitment of these poll workers. So the Dutch elections always take place on a Wednesday or a Thursday when it's for the European Parliament. And it's important to tell that on the right side you see a picture of a polling station. And that means that the people who work there get to see the people who vote. But on the day or the days after the election, the votes are being counted. On the election night, there is a provisional counting or there's a definitive counting, but there are always checks during the following days. So that means in total for the Wednesday and the days after the election, there's 125,000 people working as a poll worker, counting the votes and overseeing everything. We have 4 nationwide elections. 3 of them occur every year, every 4 years, and the European election for the European Parliament occur every 5 years. But as our government, sometimes doesn't fulfill the full 4 years. So on average, we have every year an election. And it's important to say that the municipalities play a crucial role. The Kiesraad, the Dutch Electoral Council, supports the municipalities and has a role when there's nationwide elections. But the municipalities, they are responsible for the polling stations and also for the poll workers that sit on these polling stations. We have 342 municipalities of all different kinds. So it means that their approach to poll workers also differs per municipality. Well, what are these bottlenecks? The first is the increased complexity of the task. So I think you've seen around the world that that there's a lot of attention for the electoral integrity, and that is really important. But it also means that the procedures and the checks within the electoral process make things more complex, and there's a good reason for that. But it also means that it has become more difficult for poll workers to fulfill these tasks because these are long days, and I will emphasize that further on. The second one is difficulties with recruitment and selection. So municipalities are responsible for recruiting enough poll workers, but it also means that when there are not enough people, they get into difficulty, and it has a few elections before it has happened that some polling stations had to shut down because they didn't get enough staff. And the third and the fourth bottlenecks is appreciation. Municipalities are also responsible for the appreciation of poll workers. They get compensation for it, but I speak about appreciation because our research found out that the feeling of that they're being appreciated for their work, the most important factor for that is not the compensation they get, but that they were thanked by the municipality or by a mayor or someone else. That's really helped with the feeling of appreciation. And last one is training, because, well, to be a poll worker, you have to get trained, and to work well, it's really important that you understand the job you have to do. Well, as I said, it's a relatively long day, and it's also a normal weekday. It's a Wednesday or a Thursday. So as you see on this map, a lot of countries in the world have their elections on Sunday, and well, there are some countries who don't do it in the weekends, but this really makes it hard for people who work or with children, or who have to take care of other people, to work as a poll worker. And it means that their opening hours are from 7:30 to 9 p.m. And on average, it takes till well, the middle of the night or a bit later than that to finish the provisional counting or the definitive counting. It depends per municipality what they exactly count, but all votes get counted at least once. Sometimes they also count the votes on the only per party, or sometimes they per party and per person on that list. So I hope then now you can see the map I was talking about. So a lot of purple for the Sunday. And then I go on to the next slide. And that is the difficulties with recruitment and selection. And well, in fact, we're very happy to show these results. They're in Dutch, but I'll explain to you. We have highly motivated poll workers. They're mainly motivated by doing something for the society or democracy. So I think that should be presented as the bigger picture. They also like it that it's a nice day with well, people they get to know. It's within their community, and well, for a smaller part, it's the second to last row is the financial compensation, and it is somewhat important, but we see it's mainly the motivation for younger poll workers. So they think it's more important, the compensation, but we see a lot of poll workers who are doing it, well, for the reason for the democracy, or because they simply think it's a nice job to do. Well, what are the difficulties for the municipalities then? Well, even though this is a very positive story, it is hard to recruit enough poll workers, but also to recruit enough qualified poll workers. So sometimes people are really happy to help, but are not qualified for the job. And this is especially for chairpersons. Almost half of the municipalities have said in the questionnaire that that's hard or really hard to find enough chairpersons. And one of the main reasons for this is that it's a big responsibility for people, and they think, well, I don't think I'm able to do this, so I won't be a chairperson. So that makes it really hard for the municipalities to find enough of them. Well, but next to these more organizational aspects of poll works, there's more value to them. So not only getting enough people, but also professionality is really important, because when voters are helped and you get more, well, trustworthy election results, and it's important for the trust of the voters, because when they're helped in a good way, they also get more trust in the results. That is international research shows it. But it's, on the same side, or on the other side, transparency is also a very important value, because when you are able to help as a poll worker, then you're able to see the electoral process, and it is easier for you to trust it, because it's more something you've seen and you've acted within. And the last part is, I think, also really important, the trust and representativeness, because when you go to a polling station, the research shows that when you recognize yourself at the polling station, you have a higher trust in the election. So a representative polling station is also seen as important, and there are also could be other values. So the independence of the polling station could also be a play here. Okay, and then the question is, how representative is the polling station? So I think this is also in other countries, but they're mainly, old people. The average age is around 60. This is also because it's really hard when you're working to help as a poll worker. There's also a lot of people with higher education, and we see this because the 28% of the people in the Netherlands have got lower education, but this only 12% of them helps as poll worker, whereas the higher education people are with 35% or 36 in this figure, and they represent over 50% of the poll workers. So, and there's also a lot of civil servants, because it has become too difficult for municipalities to find enough poll workers. So what they do is they ask their own personnel to help as a poll worker, and this might interfere with the idea of a representative polling station. So you see in the figure down here that over 35% of the chairpersons is from the own municipality, and 18% of the total number of poll workers. So you see the municipalities see this as a solution. Well, there are 4 ideal ways of recruitment, and this doesn't mean that I see them as ideal, but in countries you see volunteers. So we have that in the Netherlands, people can volunteer to help as a poll worker. The second one is political parties who nominate poll workers. We saw a presentation about this yesterday. For example, in Poland you have this, but also in Austria. People get assigned as a poll worker is a thing they do in Belgium. And the help of civil servants, for example, in India, only civil servants help. But it's important to say that you see also a mix of these ideal ways of recruitment throughout the world, and also in the Netherlands, where we use volunteers, but also civil servants help as a poll worker. Well, then I'll skip this and I go to the end of my presentation. So what are possible solutions for this, for the difficulties with finding enough people, and also difficulties with the representativeness of the poll workers? Well, we as Kiesraad could help municipalities with training and recruitment, but also as the electoral process gets more difficult and complex, it's also really important to keep it as easy as possible to help as a poll worker. And we could also find other ways of recruitment, for example, communities, sport clubs. We can ask people to volunteer, so not assign them, because in Belgium you could get a fine, but you could also give people a letter, send them a letter and ask to help. And this last option, well, I'm really interested in what other people think about is it's more civil servants. They really help in getting a professional organization of the polling station, but it's, well, a bit difficult for the representativeness of the polling station. So thank you for your attention, and I hope I didn't take too much of the time, and thank you.
Thank you, Niels. A reminder that even long-established democracies face very concrete operational challenges, and the elections ultimately depend on people willing to show up and work them. So our final presentation comes from the caucus. Giorgi calendarishly of the election commission. Sorry, you can just say your own name, Georgi.
Actually,
it's so difficult to read.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm Giorgi, Sharabidze, deputy chairperson of the CC of Georgia, and Mr. Chairperson was unable to join us. That's why I'm here with you, and I'm more than glad to share some Georgian experience regarding modernization of elections. And so, dear colleagues, it is my privilege to present a comprehensive administrative evaluation of Georgian election journey over the last several years. Before addressing the technical implementation, we must first address the fundamental institutional challenges we set out to resolve. Why did we undertake this massive reform? The decision to modernize was driven by 40 institutional challenges, and you can see these challenges. First, we needed to reduce human error at the precinct level and make voting intuitive for citizens. Second, traditionally waiting for paper results created an informative vacuum that lasted up to 10 hours, which often fed skepticism and tension. A modernized, faster approach was no longer optional, it was a necessity. Third, we wanted to build a system where every single ballot could be instantly accounted for and audited. Fourth, we aimed to completely eliminate manual math discrepancies and procedural slips during the initial tally. And the fifth, we aimed to proactively monitor, expose, and we worked to neutralize systematic disinformation in order to protect and uphold public faith in the democratic processes. This wasn't sudden leap. We spent almost a decade carefully trialing these systems on the ground. In reality, our current framework is the result of a highly deliberate 8-year evolutionary process. So as you can see on this timeline, we took our first steps in 2018 with a modest by-election pilot of just 3 polling stations. We expanded to 8 stations in 2019, and in 2021, we scaled up to 31 stations in one of the capital cities district. Each municipal cycle in 2022 and the larger 2023 by-elections served as a vital testing ground. This careful practice paved the way for our first nationwide deployment. The nationwide 2024 parliamentary elections across over 2,200 precincts and the 2025 local municipal elections, which successfully served millions of voters across 3,061 precincts. To understand the reality of election day, let me examine the specific technology utilized on the ground at our polling station. We didn't use remote online voting. Rather, we introduced on-site paper ballot to digital infrastructure. On the left, you see the poll count optical scanners, PCOS machines. These devices securely capture and log the voter's handmarked choice on the paper ballot instantly. In the middle, you see the voter verification machine or view tablet. These digital poll books digitalized our registration lists. They allowed election officials to verify voter identification cards or passports on site, effectively neutralizing the risk of duplicate registration or multiple voting. And on the right, a tablet. Throughout election day, poll workers used the tablet to transmit voter turnout data and preliminary election results received, printed from PCOS machines directly to the CC secure server. This allows the administration to monitor participation rates in real time at specific intervals. I want to emphasize a fundamental element of our system. Technology never replaced the physical paper trail. In Georgia, we maintained a secure hybrid model. Every voter marked a physical paper ballot, which remains the legally binding record. This robust, business process-oriented approach had a major strategic impact. Providing immediate, highly accurate preliminary results helped mitigate the influence of biased exit polls or parallel voted tabulations. How did we verify that the machines were counting accurately? For a systematic, legally required audit process. First, in every single technologically equipped polling station, a full physical manual recount of all paper ballots was conducted on site. Second, we established a randomized lottery via 5 polling stations per electoral constituency, were chosen for immediate manual recounts, including technological and traditional polling stations. The results of 3 audits of these audits were definitive. The technology provided to be precise, transparent, and completely verifiable. Transparency is built directly into the hardware. When the polls close, the optical scanner generates a physical paper receipt that mirrors the electronic choices recorded in its memory. This receipt is printed immediately in front of party proxies, international and local observers. Thanks to these physical receipts, independent auditors can easily cross-check the digital results against the physical slips and raw paper ballots. Let's look at the speed of results, which is one of our administrative accomplishments. Traditionally, gathering and announcing preliminary results in Georgia required between 5 to 10 hours. In the 2024 parliamentary elections, the preliminary results were processed, transmitted, and made public in just 1 hour and 45 minutes. In 2025, during our municipal elections, we improved that time to 1 hour and 25 minutes. We understand that highly polarized environment, trust must be earned through evidence. This is why we subjected our electoral system to a rigorous independent technology compliance audit. Before deployment, international, highly reputable US-based testing company audited our source code, verified our device configurations, and certified that the database architecture was closed, secure, and unhackable. By opening up our technology to international scrutiny, we aim to provide an objective baseline of trust for all stakeholders. Deploying technology is useless if electorate doesn't know how to use it. To bridge this gap, the CC launched an unprecedented multi-channel educational campaign. We deployed instructional video materials, traditional TV and radio advertisements, and interactive banners across the web. We ran ads at high traffic public spaces, shopping malls, public transport, cinemas, and justice houses. Our official website and dedicated contact hub will be transformed into around-the-clock support centers to answer every voter's technical question. To make sure the new technology didn't leave anyone out, we took it straight to the communities. We organized 3 massive nationwide mock elections. These mock setups allowed voters to physically practice scanning their ballots and using verification devices before the election day. Totally up to 600,000 voters participated in these activities, which is an unprecedented number, considering that the number of voters in the country is approximately 3.4 million voters. Importantly, we prioritized regions densely populated by ethnic minorities, translating our interfaces, leaflets, and instructional guides to Armenian and Azerbaijani languages to ensure absolute accessibility and equity. We also use mobile apps to educational games. We launched a dedicated mobile application allowing citizens to easily check their registration status, find their polling stations, and track electoral news. Additionally, we created an interactive educational web game. This portal walked users through a virtual polling station, making it fun and incredibly easy for younger people to learn. Throughout this transformation, we maintained an open door policy. We organized dozens of consultative meetings with local civil society organizations, political parties, and international expert panels. Every challenge, technical specification, and legal adjustment were discussed in open roundtables. While agreement was not always universal, our dedication to dialogue was absolute. The media plays a vital role in keeping the public informed. TCC maintained an active partnership with all media sectors, providing daily updates, direct interviews, and live press conferences. We launched dedicated TV programs and to visually demonstrate how our optical scanners and tablets worked. Our goal was to ensure that journalists had direct, unhindered access to our technical experts so they could report on our administrative changes accurately and objectively. In general, coordinated network among state institutions, the media, civil society, and international partners creates a stronger and more effective system against disinformation. Based on today's reality, it can be said that the fight against disinformation is a continuous process grounded in 4 key principles: monitoring, prevention, rapid response, and cooperation. In conclusion, the Georgian election experience demonstrates that digital modernization is a powerful tool. Our technology performed with exceptional operational success, delivered rapid results, and established a highly secure, auditable paper trail. The experience demonstrated that the technical component of the electoral process was managed with precision and reliability. Out of nearly 50,000 electronic devices deployed, only 0.01% experienced any technical issues. As a result, not a single polling precinct had to revert to traditional manual paper-based voting method. Ultimately, the first technological election in 2024 successfully and seamlessly processed over 2,100,000 voters, making the highest voter turnout since 2012 without any delays and complications. This reflects the high degree of preparedness and technical stability achieved by the election administration. However, our experience also serves as a vital reminder to all of us. Advanced technology is a powerful operational tool, but the foundation of electoral integrity remains institutional trust. Technical modernization must always be paired with open dialogue, robust civic education, and proactive defense of the truth. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Of course, I am ready to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Giorgi. It's now my pleasure to hand over to our discussant, Sonali Campion from the University of East Anglia, who will offer comments to help our panelists further develop their papers. So Sonali, you have up to 15 minutes. Please go ahead.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers for some really interesting presentations today. I think they really highlight that EMBs today are really kind of juggling 2 objectives. So where before there was much more priority that was about election administration and delivery and ensuring voters that was the kind of main drive. Today, there is a much bigger piece that is about ensuring voters have confidence in the process. So I particularly like Sangwani's line that people judge elections not only on how they're conducted, but also how they understand them. And I think that's become this real critical challenge that's facing all EMBs today. So on the kind of delivery side, that's not to say that the practical problems haven't gone away. And so Nepal talked about some of the very practical issues around connectivity and literacy, which still are barriers to successful delivery. And I think there was also the point of very unpredictable timelines. And particularly in 2025, we saw quite a large number of snap elections called. And Nepal was one of those because it was called in 2025, although the election happened in 26. And you've also got sort of electoral reforms being passed very close to elections. So you're seeing a lot of this innovation under pressure. And what I really liked about the Nepal case study and the way in which it can be pitched is, okay, so how do you rise to that challenge? And I think as a really good example of that going on there. And I think perhaps you could talk a bit more about how you strengthen the risk management aspects of that. So you talked about not having much time to deliver it and not having much time to test. So how did you take calculated risks around that and basically mitigate those issues while really maximizing the inclusivity? I think the other thing on the delivery side is that we're seeing issues that are familiar from many years ago, but that seem to be intensifying. So poll workers, as was discussed in the Netherlands presentation, is a really good example of that because, as you said, that's always been a challenge to get enough staff to man your polling stations to do everything around those kind of frontline tasks. But actually this complexity of the work increasing is a really important point. So you then require staff with more skills, whether that's technology-based skills, more stamina, so that with an aging kind of polling worker population, that leads to challenges of whether they can sort of can manage the full long days. And also this point about increased scrutiny, and I think in some of our more established democracies, we're beginning to see harassment of poll workers and things like that, and actually motivating poll workers in those environments can be more challenging. And so that then links to the issue of recruitment and selection. And again, this is a really nice illustration that came across in the Netherlands case of this kind of challenge of staffing, which is definitely, again, intensifying in lots of places. And I know in the UK and Australia, particularly post-COVID, it's been a more difficult thing. They've had higher rates of turnover of staff who aren't necessarily returning from election to election. So yeah, I think the findings there are really important, and it'd be great to bring out sort of more tangible recommendations of how the Netherlands is trying to address that, and also looking comparatively to other cases. And I think when you're combining these two issues of delivery and then the confidence thing, the information space is really becoming this kind of separate front of election management. So EMBs have always had to communicate what they're doing and where people need to be on election day and those kind of things. But now there's much more of this piece, which Sangwani really spoke to, that's about safeguarding the confidence in EMBs and the process that they run. And that's a responsibility to be more transparent. So a lot of the stuff that that the Georgian case was speaking to make it really easy for voters, stakeholders, whoever, to actually be able to follow the process and understand what's going on, and for sort of different threads about what might be going on to be able to be quashed fairly early on. You're also seeing EMBs taking this increasingly prominent role in digital literacy, and I've noticed that in cases like Australia and Brazil. And I think that sort of is this extension of, okay, we once had challenges with literacy in terms of reading information and things like that, but now actually it's how people navigate the electoral environment really speaks to this challenge of how EMBs communicate and how they inspire confidence. And I think the Georgian case was really nice in that it really highlighted that, yes, you have these technology upgrades which can improve your processes, and that's one part of it, but actually making sure that this transparency and verifiability is at the heart of it is really key. I think the other thing that the presentations really kind of drew attention to was the fact that when you're working in these challenging operating environments, whether that's because of disinformation, but also shifting civilian expectations, or things like climate emergencies and COVID-19, we're really seeing more necessity for collaboration to facilitate effective delivery. So Nepal's example of working with their national ID agency is a really good example of that, because that sort of massive upgrade in how the registration process worked and the inclusivity was necessary, it was enabled by that working together. And I know Malawi has also worked with the national ID provider to facilitate a smoother system of registration. And there's also this kind of aspect that Malawi spoke to of engaging with journalists and working with opinion leaders. And I think Georgia also really highlighted the importance of that sort of engagement with the media and other stakeholders. And I think the Netherlands case of using civil servants as poll workers, it's a really good avenue for expanding the staff pool, but only if the bureaucracy is seen as neutral. So we've seen in some countries where a lot of sort of civil service jobs are seen as very politicized. And so that can leave your electoral system vulnerable to being seen as biased towards the government because you're using those workers. So that is very sort of context dependent. I know in Australia they do work with government to second staff in the run up to elections and also as their kind of more temporary workers. So yes, with caveats, I would say to sort of question posed there, but I'd be interested to hear other opinions on that. And I think the final thing I'd like to speak to is that the presentation's really sort of beyond just collaboration. It highlights how reliant election management bodies are on these wider networks of actors that are involved in elections, which the EMB might play this kind of coordinating role, but does not necessarily control. And I think this is what the questions are sometimes raised around things like the Nepal example of working with an ID agency. Malawi has, as I mentioned, has worked with the ID agency, but at the most recent election there were challenges because the ID agency was struggling to provide people with the ID cards in time. And so then you've got a difficult situation for the election management body where they're not technically responsible for the problem, but ultimately they are responsible for delivering a credible election. So risk management in those relationships becomes a really critical part of yes, taking advantage of the capacity that comes from working with your partners, but also thinking about how you still safeguard the process when you're working with other people. And I think the sort of seeing communication as both a part of delivery, but also trust building, as has been highlighted by the presentations, is really critical because I think all the cases highlighted the importance of working with the stakeholders and bringing people on board, which helps delivery, but it also helps that kind of trust building. And I really liked in the Netherlands the sort of talking about how actually having people participate as poll workers is in and of itself a good way of building trust in the system because they experience how the system works. They see behind the scenes, if you like. And I think it's also important sometimes nowadays there is this very kind of broadcast approach to communication. And it's important to stress, as I think the presentation showed, is that trust comes from a sense that the EMB is also listening to and responding to genuine issues that are raised. So that communication has to be two ways or having the engagement there. So I really liked the Georgian examples of how there was sort of virtual ways to trial the polling station and get to know how the systems worked, but also in-person opportunities to test the systems and understand it and engage with the electoral staff. And I think in this age of disinformation, it can be quite difficult to separate what is worth responding to, what kind of things you need to de-escalate, and what would be amplifying or adding hot air to. And so that's a very kind of difficult line that I think everyone's beginning to, or really feeling like they have to navigate. And finally, when you're working in these networks and you're and thinking about this collaboration that is becoming so central, it's really important to keep independence at the heart of that. And I think, again, I could see from the Georgian example, but also the Malawi communication strategy, there was this real emphasis on kind of reasserting the independence, being transparent about how things worked and what partnerships were going on. And I think that's quite critical, and it's something that has to be constantly reinforced because independence is no longer kind of assumed in any way, even in an established democracy. And so it constantly needs to be reasserted, but also demonstrated. It's show, don't just tell. And it's not enough to just say, we are independent. You have to kind of prove that. And sometimes it can be difficult because, yeah, the nature of leadership. I mean, Sangwani mentioned the chairperson for the Malawi Election Commission changed very close to the election. And so that person then has to build the trust again in order to take the election forward. So it's not always entirely in the control of the ENB, but it's really important to consider. So just to conclude, it's a real kind of balance nowadays of not just the capacity to make sure you're delivering a really high quality process, but also that trust building aspect is no longer a nice to have. It is central to the delivery of elections that have integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonali, for your thoughtful remarks. And to ensure we save enough time for the Q&A, several questions have been posted in the chat. I'd like to ask the panelists in order